Welcome back to 21C. I'm Anne-Marie Medowake. When a pregnant woman drinks, so does her baby. Alcohol enters the mother's bloodstream and then goes directly into the baby's blood supply. Every year in Canada, more than 600 babies are born with fetal alcohol syndrome. Officially identified in the 1970s, the first group to be diagnosed with the syndrome is now in its 20s. This is the first generation to live life with the fetal alcohol label. The first generation to try and answer the question, can someone with this disease live a normal life? May 1974, the first time Canadians are introduced to the newly identified fetal alcohol syndrome, a warning for mothers to stop drinking while pregnant. Fast forward nearly 30 years. Fetal alcohol syndrome is now the #1 cause of mental disability in the Western world and keeps Dr. Christine Locke busier than ever as one of North America's leading experts in its diagnosis.
Hey, how are you?
Today, she's checking on this baby girl, who we were asked to not identify. She was brought in by her grandmother because her mom lives on the streets of Vancouver and has fetal alcohol syndrome herself.
Did she know she was pregnant?
No.
No. So,
What are some of the telltale signs and symptoms?
the physical features of FAS are first seen in the facial features. Our face develops at a time when many women aren't aware that they're pregnant, and so a higher level of alcohol exposure at that time may change the way that our eyes and our nose, our lips are all sort of placed. One of the more discriminating features is the way that this maxilla or premaxilla area forms, so that there's flattening of the space between the nose and the upper lip, and thinning of the upper lip.
And these facial features are specific to FAS?
They're specific for FAS, and this is an example of the most extreme effect that alcohol can have on the developing brain. This is the brain of a baby who died shortly after birth from fetal alcohol syndrome. The earlier we make a diagnosis of FAS and the earlier that there's support and understanding for that individual, the better the outcome.
Fetal alcohol syndrome is completely untreatable. But is it possible to have it and still live a normal life? The disease's first known generation of victims may have the answer.
How would you describe yourself?
Abnormal.
Why abnormal?
I do weird stuff. I can't explain what I do, but sometimes, or the way I say words and the way I put it in sentences. I don't feel like a normal person, though.
Mark Steeves was adopted by his parents as an infant. He lives with them in Surrey, British Columbia, and has had a difficult time living a normal life. He's 26 years old, but because of fetal alcohol syndrome, lives his life trapped with a 14-year-old's ability.
It's bad. I wish I didn't have it. I wish nobody had it or anything like that. I don't know. You get frustrated a lot, and you don't know. I don't talk about my problems or anything, so I guess that's worse. And I don't know. How can I say it?
Mark's life is simple. He spends most of his time at the local internet cafe playing video games. It's a forced simplicity because his low functioning level doesn't allow much else. Mark, like many with fetal alcohol syndrome, has difficulty understanding the consequences of his actions and is easily manipulated by others, a combination that often leads to collisions both at home and with the law, which is exactly what happened.
I stole this car, and I guess, well, I met this little kid. He was 11 when I was 16, and he taught me how to steal a car and everything with a pair of scissors, and then that just got me going into the wrong direction. And I just kept on doing it and doing it.
Had you ever done anything like that before?
No.
So what made you want to try?
I don't know, it's just different people, I guess.
Have you talked to any of your friends yet today?
His adoptive parents struggled with Mark from the beginning. Before he was diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome, they didn't know what was wrong with him or themselves.
We're thinking that we are really horrible parents, that where did we fail? Like, what went wrong? We raised a sister exactly the same way, and we had no problems whatsoever. So what were we missing with Mark?
We started using a little more tough love, a lot of consequences. When he would do something wrong, we would punish him. And the odd time when he did something right, he would be rewarded, but usually it was things that he was doing wrong. He would be punished, but that seemed to make things worse.
Mark was eventually caught stealing cars and went to jail. But it was during his stay in prison that fetal alcohol syndrome was first suggested. He was visited by Dr. Christine Locke, and the diagnosis came back positive. What did that feel like to have a label finally?
Well, two things. I guess one, it was kind of an answer that we weren't just bad parents and we didn't just screw up in some way, but there was a medical reason for some of his behaviors. But at the same time, I think a sense of loss, you know, because...
Yeah, there was a grief.
Yeah.
There was a grieving time. We actually went through a long grief because we realized all of a sudden that all our hopes and dreams for him were gone.
What kinds of dreams did you have for yourself? As far as a job, a career?
I don't know. I wanted to be a garbage man or a race car driver when I was growing up. I don't know why a garbage man, but I thought it was pretty neat to be a garbage man.
Since his diagnosis, Mark's parents oversee nearly all aspects of his life, including his choice of friends. Even so, they know a return to jail is just one bad decision away.
Bad things happen when Mark is in jail. He meets a lot of people he shouldn't be meeting, and not a lot of new contacts because Mark doesn't really understand what real relationships are, in the sense of you develop a relationship over time. People have to prove themselves to you. Mark can know somebody for a very, very short period of time, and they're a friend, and he will trust them completely. And so he's extremely vulnerable when he's in custody. And so that's my biggest fear, is he'll end up back in jail.
Are you ever scared, Mark, that you might end up going back to jail or end up in prison?
Yeah, a little bit, but I just try not to think of that, so I don't have to worry about it. Because if I think about it, then something might happen, and then it'll be right back where I started.
Reoccurring brushes with the police are not unusual for youth affected with fetal alcohol syndrome. It's one of the biggest challenges facing law enforcement units across the country. How to teach people who have no sense of consequences for their actions to not reoffend. At first glance, it's seemingly impossible, but a solution may have been found here in Lethbridge, Alberta.
So the golfing and everything done for the year for you, or no? The curl?
Constable Jim Olson of the Lethbridge Police is receiving an award today. It's a medal from the Queen.
Oh, there they are back there. Oh yeah, sure they do.
He started a program with a basic idea: help keep fetal alcohol syndrome kids out of the courts.
Because they don't understand consequences. They don't understand, they're very impulsive. So when they do things wrong, at times they even say, well, yeah, I shouldn't have done that, but then they'll go right back out and do it again.
19-year-old Sarah Morris was his first test case. She got his attention after being charged with assault. There's nothing complex about his program. Basically, once an offending youth with fetal alcohol syndrome is identified, Olson works with parents, teachers, and prosecutors to keep them out of jail and in a structured environment.
I'd say about 80% of the kids that we have dealt with so far have not returned back to the judicial system, which is really, really good for us.
Olson struck a deal with the prosecutor and made his business to know Sarah's business. And if she began to stray, he got in her face.
When I first met him, he was a mean prick. When I very first met him, I did not like the guy at all. All he ever tried to do was get me into trouble.
What kind of trouble did you get into?
Just like fighting and running away, skipping school, just that kind of stuff.
How old were you when that started?
Probably 13.
Do you think that was just you being a rebellious teenager, or do you think that was FAS?
I think that was FAS.
Sarah's mom drank heavily during her pregnancy, and while Sarah doesn't have the facial features of fetal alcohol syndrome, the damage to her brain has made life a struggle, witnessed by her adoptive mom, who is also her biological aunt.
I was angry at first because I thought, you know, here's this poor kid, you know, that I've been so angry at and fighting with, and I felt guilty because, you know, I'd spanked her and grounded her, and then I find out that, you know, there was a legitimate reason for this. And then I guess relief too, because then I knew that, okay, I'm not a bad parent, you know, there is a reason for this, we can get through this now, and by having the supports in place, it really helped a lot.
The supports were put in place by Jim Olson, who kept on hammering the same point. Every action has a consequence.
Now I know, okay, if I'm gonna go out and do this, if I'm gonna go beat the crap out of somebody or steal a car, I'm gonna go straight to jail. Like, that's it. I know that's what'll happen. So I'm like, okay, I can either go beat somebody up or steal a car and this will happen to me and I'll lose everything, or I could just go away from the scene, calm down, leave it alone, and everything will mellow out in a little while.
She's working hard in the community, and she's not getting herself in trouble, and she's trying to become as best of a citizen she can. What else more could you ask for from anybody in society? I mean, we're talking about bringing somebody up, getting them through school, getting them into a job, and getting them to be a positive role model in your community. That's what she's striving for. That I wouldn't ask that for. That's all I want from my kids. So when Sarah steps up to the plate and does something that's totally amazing, and I'm just so proud that she could actually come out and do that.
The award has highlighted the importance of this work within justice in identifying and managing the lives of children, adolescents, and adults with FAS.
Jim Olson's program is the only one of its kind in Canada. Even with its high success rate, there is a fundamental flaw. Youth with fetal alcohol syndrome get help after they get in trouble, leaving the question, what can be done to help before?
What do you know about FAS? Can anyone tell me what you know?
These education students at the University of Prince Edward Island are getting a lesson in fetal alcohol syndrome, how to identify it, and how to work with students who suffer from it.
Actually, to diagnose fetal alcohol syndrome is done through deduction. It's not like you can take a blood test and know. It's not.
And their teachers today are true experts. The university's vice president and her adopted daughter, Kelly, an example of what can happen when the syndrome is caught early. Do you ever wish you could just snap your fingers and FAS be gone?
Definitely.
Do you ever think about what life is like without FAS?
Sometimes I do, and I always wonder if it's going to be easier without FAS, or if because of FAS I'm given certain things that other people don't have.
25-year-old Kelly Timmons doesn't fit into the commonly thought of mold for youth with fetal alcohol syndrome. She doesn't get into trouble with police, and she's about to graduate from university. But it wasn't always this way. Like so many other kids with fetal alcohol syndrome, Kelly started out as a child with social and learning problems.
It wasn't until I was teaching at the University of Calgary and I was teaching about disabilities and I started teaching about fetal alcohol syndrome. And when I would give an example of a behavior, every time I gave an example of behavior, I had an image of Kelly's behavior and I could tell a story. I started to see that for every symptom and every characteristic of FAS, I could describe something with Kelly.
Kelly's mom suspected fetal alcohol syndrome when she was just 8 years old, but didn't tell her daughter until she was 20.
I didn't want Kelly to think she had an excuse for not achieving things.
Kelly has achieved more than what fetal alcohol syndrome victims are supposed to. It's been a slow process, and after 7 years, she wants to graduate university this spring.
Basically, I take my time with it. I study, and if I get it, I'll get it. If not, it just won't happen.
You seem so relaxed about that.
I'm almost done. I can't be relaxed about it. So ask me in April how relaxed I am. So, I mean, it doesn't bother me. If I fail a course, I fail a course. But if I get a course, then I know I've combated that challenge, and that's a big triumph for me.
Kelly seems to function at an amazingly high level. Why is that?
Well, I think a lot of it had to do with the tremendous intervention she had all through, well, right up until she was 18, 19.
Kelly had tutors all throughout school. Her mom continually raised what she expected Kelly to achieve. And more often than not, Kelly met those expectations.
I decided that Kelly was going to get a driver's license. I found the best driving instructor in Charlottetown, and I hired him. I said, we're going to need some extra lessons, because I said, Kelly will need some extra support in learning to drive. After lesson 35, he sat on our kitchen table and said, it's not going to work. Like, we're not going to get there. And at 92 lessons, Kelly got a driving license.
I didn't realize it was that many, but anyway.
I mean, sometimes it's hard, and sometimes I feel I push too hard, and sometimes she says I push too hard, but she always rises to the challenge. She never, ever disappoints or ever lets us down, and if anything, she is an amazing young woman, that how much she surprises us with what she can achieve. Kelly's example of the potential of a child with FAS.
Do you ever sometimes feel like maybe using FAS as an excuse? Well, I didn't pass it, but it's okay because I have FAS.
I don't ever want to use that, because then I won't push myself to do as hard as I've been doing. And then it'll be just my parents that are pushing myself. I want to be able to push myself. I want to be able to see what I can do. And if I do that, then that won't happen.
Get one of those for my birthday?
Mark Steves has had, it seems, a more difficult time living with his fetal alcohol syndrome than Kelly. Not only has he had difficulty with school and brushes with the law, he's also a dad. He doesn't have custody of his daughter, Jade, but sees her several times a week. Being a father is one challenge Mark has been able to live up to.
Here comes Mr. Cat.
He's just a great dad. He's a dad I guess we all wish we could be.
Explain that.
Mark will play with his daughter and just play with her. He just gets to her level, and he's able to play with her, and they have a relationship I think very few dads actually have with their kids.
You're so cute.
Do you think you're a good dad?
I think so. I play with her a lot, and she doesn't usually get mad at me unless I bug her a lot. Poke at her a little bit, and she gets mad. She kind of makes this grunting sound. So it's kind of funny, so I just keep on doing it just to tease her and that.
Are you proud of him, Bob?
I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We are proud of our son. Very much so. We are.
To a lot of people, Mark would be considered sort of a disposable person, I think. He's never going to have a great job. He's never going to be in a position where people will look at him as being important. But yeah.
He's our boy. He's ours. And we'll do everything to make his life as successful as possible.
May 1974, the first time Canadians are introduced to the newly identified fetal alcohol syndrome. Mark, Sarah, and Kelly were all born after this date and handed a fate they never deserved. Same goes for the newly diagnosed baby girl brought into Dr. Christine Locke by her grandma. She too, like her mother, has fetal alcohol syndrome.
And we're in the process of trying to find an apartment.
This first generation is laying the groundwork for all those babies yet to be born with fetal alcohol syndrome in Canada. Babies who too will struggle for a normal life.